bad barrack because there were something like 20 prisoners crammed into a cell. So they gave us this brand new jail, and this was in the early 1800s, a century between them. And the reason this was considered to be much, much more fitting and much more, the other jail apparently had something like 20 prisoners crammed into the cell. Stirling was considered to be the most strategically important town in the whole of Scotland, and the reason for that is if you want to control Scotland, you've got to control Stirling and Stirling Castle, because there's only one small bridge that would allow you to cross from the lowlands to the highlands. And typically, he's almost because he was a bit of a philanthropist, the sort of Bill Gates of his day, because he built these beautiful hostels, and there's a church, and there's a hospital and a bowling green, just looking out on, and again we're not used to prisoners being right in the centre of things, they're normally sort of tidied away, so and if you look at these two lampstands here, and up above, just at the apex of those, you'll see what looks like a back to front number 4. It's not actually a number 4.
And its location is up. Past.
And then I just want to take you
Who's there?
Marie de Guise. And Marie de Guise was a noblewoman, came from a hugely powerful noble family, wealthy family in France. They were almost more, in fact they were more powerful than the king in many respects. And apparently Henry VIII had previously sent an emissary over to France and had a wee word with Marie de Guise to see if she would like to marry Henry VIII. And apparently, I don't know if this is true, but I just like the story. Apparently Marie de Guise had said she'd be delighted to marry the King Henry VIII if she had 2 heads, but sadly she only had 1. So James got her instead. James got her. So and there's layer upon layer. And what you'll notice as you go through the centre is a dramatic change. It's be much more than that in an hourglass. Now the reason we've got 4 children is if it was plague or cholera or something like that, for example, they didn't really bond with their children in infancy because they just expected they might not survive. So in some of the older graves you'll get things like a child's name repeated and repeated because they would just keep moving the child's name on. But for some reason it's always 4 is the style, if you like. But it's very stark, this. It's very unforgiving because you've got 4 children, you've got a skull and crossbones, and you've got an hourglass. And what that's effectively communicating to us is life is short and it's ticking away, and it's almost like it'll be you next. There's nothing sentimental about these, and it's very, very typical of this particular time to see the gravestones like that. And then if we go ahead just 1 century, we'll see somebody in the church. And apparently this gravestone was erected by a family in 1823, but it was commemorating the death of one of their ancestors a good time previous to that. And apparently at the time there was, because I was looking at it and I was saying, what's going on here? There's this man here and he's got a spade, and then there's this what looks like a woman underneath here, and it's almost like she's fighting him off.
Yeah.
And of course it would have been all nice pretty colours, they were telling me. And they said it was at a time they were commemorating the death of this woman, and it was a time in Scotland where there was a flowering of medical schools, including in Stirling here, and the only place that they could get the corpses to dissect were like John Rankin's victims, and there must have been he mustn't have been killing enough folk because there was then a roaring trade in grave robbery. So this man here, and we know who she's called, Mary Wilson, we know her. He buried Mary one day, and then 2 days later he came back and dug her up and tried to sell her to the medical school, and apparently got his just deserts.